Welcome to MacStories Unwind, a weekly review of everything MacStories and more. I'm John Voorhees, and with me, of course, is Federico Vitici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
It's the weekend. I'm ready for it, no doubt. It's been a long week. We had an inauguration in the United States, and
congratulations. We have a new president.
We have a new president. There's been a lot of news, and we had things going on the site too. So we should dig right in and start talking about, one of the things that I wrote this week was a review of an update to MindNode, the mind mapping app for both iOS and the Mac. And the Mac version got an update this week, which I really like. It's had an outline view for a long time as an alternative way to look at your mind map. And that outline now is editable, which means you can work in either view as much as you want. I like that because I sometimes I'm kind of an outline person to begin with. So being able to edit that way and see it immediately reflected in the mind map is terrific. And you can view it with just the mind map, just the outline, or the two side by side. Plus, on top of that, it's got great keyboard shortcut support. So, you can really move fast if you're a good typist. And I don't know if you know this, Federico, but I'm a touch typist. I can type with my eyes closed, and I can even correct.
That explains all the typos that I find.
Wow, touche. Yes, that's my excuse now. Oh, I was doing that with my eyes closed, but yes, I can type with my eyes closed. That's a good one, Federico. You got me there, boy. You got me good. I can actually make corrections with my eyes closed too, but not as well, obviously. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So, what do you think of this? It's not on iOS yet, but it's coming. It's coming to iOS in a couple of months, I think.
Yeah, I'm very excited by this because we mentioned this before. There are no, at least for me personally speaking, there are no truly great outlining apps for iOS and iPadOS. Mm-hmm. There's some options, but none of them get close to the kind of fast and intuitive and modern experience that I would love to have in a modern outliner. Now, the thing is that I'm already using MindNode as my main mind mapping application. And right. Just like you mentioned in your article, there is some overlap between a mind map and an outline. Those two things are kind of complementary to each other in many ways. And so I feel like I would love to have that kind of freedom of switching between a full screen mind map view to a full screen outline view of things like, for example, a chapter of my iOS and iPadOS review. Right. It would be highly beneficial to me to be able to narrow down, a particular section of a chapter, for example, move around a few nodes in a vertical outline, which I guess it's going to be faster and more intuitive than doing so in a sprawling mind map that takes over the entire canvas of the screen. So I'm very excited by this, especially if the MindNode team can add support for images, which right now I believe they are excluded from the outline view on the Mac.
That's correct.
If you have a node in your mind map that contains an image, that image will be hidden from the outline view.
Right. It's just the text right now, although they have said that they're going to be adding a lot of the other mind map features to the outline over the course of 2021.
Right. So I am super into this. I really hope that by the time I'm going to start working on my iOS and iPadOS 15 review, which, God, I don't want to think about it right now. But
just around the corner, Federico.
No, when the time comes, many, many, many months away from now, I hope that they will have the outline mode in MindNode for iPad.
Right. I do too. I'm looking forward to it. I've been enjoying it on the Mac, and I hope to have it on the iPad as well. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this review that Alex did this week?
Doodle Jump is back. You may remember Doodle Jump as one of the really popular games from the last decade on the App Store. The original came out 9-10 years ago. The original Doodle Jump. The whole premise of the game, it was one of the really popular games to use the accelerometer and the gyroscope on the iPhone. You control this little character, this little the Doodler? I think
the
it's the
Doodler
name.
is, and I think it was 12 years ago, Federico.
12.
I think is what Alex
Wow.
says. It was really not at the very beginning of the App Store, but pretty close.
Pretty close to it. So you control the Doodler by moving your phone left and right,
Right,
and adjusting the trajectory of the little guy on the screen. Doodle Jump 2 came out a few months ago, I think. Alex has a review on the website explaining what is new. Roughly the same mechanics, but greatly improved graphics and a lot more variety when it comes to level themes. So there's like a desert theme, there's like a level in space, and of course the enemies change, and some of the core mechanics changed based on the nature of the level. It looks really fun. It looks modern. It runs great on modern Apple devices, and it's a sequel to Doodle Jump. So if you love the original game, this to me, it's that kind of game that I think it aged better than something like, say, Angry Birds, for example. Like, I could see myself playing Doodle Jump 2. I honestly cannot bring myself to play Angry Birds at this point. Like, I don't even know. Is it like Angry Birds? I don't know.
It's still a thing, I believe, but yeah, I haven't even given it a second thought for a long time.
But Doodle Jump 2, like, it's got that charm and that quirkiness to it that, yeah, I could play some Doodle Jump again. And go check out the screenshots if you're intrigued. There's one where the Doodler is wearing an astronaut suit, another where looks like a carrot. It's really fun. You should.
Yeah, there was that moment this week when Alex said, "I'm almost finished. I'm just trying to get the screenshot of the Doodler turned into a carrot." I was like, "Okay, Alex, that's dedication. That's dedication right there."
Yeah.
All right, Federico, I want to tell you about the guides feature in Apple Maps because this is something I wrote about last August when we were doing our summer preview series. And when Apple Maps launched with iOS 14, there were some guides for some big cities, mainly in the United States. I think they had London to LA, New York, Chicago, a few places. But it's really expanded quite a bit from there. There are a lot more cities, and there are also a lot more publications creating these professional guides to different things in cities, things like where to eat, activities to do, that sort of thing. But this recently, Apple also added some partnership that they have with Volunteer Match, which is an organization that matches people with various volunteer organizations in their communities. And this is a little different than what you typically find in terms of guides, which, as I said, are usually more like tourist attractions and restaurants and that sort of thing. But it allows you to find organizations in your local community where you can volunteer, which I think is a great idea, especially since, at least in the U.S. at the moment, going to restaurants and especially here in Chicago is not really an option. So having things you can do with these guides that are beyond that, including service organizations, is a terrific addition. And we highlighted that on the site this week.
Very nice. So, John, tell me, what else is new on Apple Podcasts? Because I saw that they added some new editorial features. What's going on?
They did. What they're doing, there's a new monthly feature called Spotlight, where Apple is going to highlight an up-and-coming podcast. And they started this week with a podcast, not one that I'd heard of, but that's kind of the whole point, is that it's to pick someone who's up-and-coming and give people a new show to try out. It's both a combination of artwork in the Apple Podcasts app, where the show has special spotlight artwork that is one of the big rectangles at the top of the app. It's also there's an editor's note in the description instead of, usually when you go to Apple Podcasts or any podcast player for that matter, there's a description of the show. And this replaces that with Apple's editorial notes, which is interesting because that makes those editor's notes available in any podcast player. It's just not just in Apple Podcasts, but it'll show up in, Castro or Overcast or Pocket Casts or whatever you use. And it's just another example. Apple has done curation on its own in its own directory for podcasts for quite some time, but this is a little bit more in the sense that it's both a combination of promoting it through artwork as well as doing some editorial narrative around the podcast as well.
Very nice. I think that's a really good idea. I also want to mention that something that we linked on the website a few days ago. Apple is once again showing off examples of great photography shot on iPhone. They recently had this press release for the Shot on iPhone 12 initiative, which is slightly different than previous years in that there is no contest. This year, I believe there's no, like in previous years, there used to be like a contest judged by Apple people and pro photographers. They didn't do that this time around, I guess, because of the pandemic that is going on. But they still have this press release where they are showing off some really great examples of portraits and, the night sky, cityscapes, nature shots, a bunch of really great photos taken on iPhone 12. One of them taken in Italy as well.
I saw that.
Yeah, oh wow, this is a really pretty photo. I wonder where was this taken?
I don't. Doesn't say, does it? Because I think the locations there are the locations of the photographers, not of necessarily the photographs. Although that does look like Italy to me.
Yeah, the Japan photo is also there's this waterfall from Japan. It looks really lovely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they also do not link the photographer. Sometimes why is Apple so opposed to including links to Twitter or Instagram profiles, for example? I would love to follow these people. I assume they have an Instagram account. If they take such beautiful pictures, I would be surprised if they haven't. Anyway, there's a press release. We linked it on the website. Go check out the original photos. You can download them in full resolution from the Apple website. And these are really some beautiful examples of iPhone 12 photography. I wish that I had the skills or the option to go travel somewhere and take these photos. We have a curfew at 10 p.m. I cannot even go out after 10 p.m. and take a night shot.
No, except off your balcony. Maybe you can do one of those balcony. dangle your iPad off the edge of the balcony at nighttime shots, and get the internet riled up as
John,
you like to do.
People already give me a hard time when I put electronics on the edge of the balcony. Because every time they look at those photos, they're like, "You're giving me a heartache. Why you're doing this?" And now I kind of do it to troll them.
It's I know you do.
It's more like a thing that I do on purpose now.
I worry more about the scratches on the bricks than I do about you dropping it off the balcony. But yes,
good point. Yes.
All right, let's talk about Club MacStories a little bit because we had an interesting mix of stories this week. Alex did a collection of clipboard managers, both on the Mac and iOS. And what's interesting is, you would think clipboard managers, they just save a list of things you've copied on your device. But there's more to it than that, and there's quite a variety between both platforms. So definitely worth taking a look at because Alex goes through the unique features of each one of those. And I had a couple of things in here too. We are going to talk a little bit on AppStories next week about some of the things I've been thinking about with linking lately. But one of those things is a way to get URLs out of Craft and into a format that's useful for me for things like podcast show notes or the newsletter and that kind of thing. And so I've got a shortcut in there that does that, as well as kind of a mini review of the OWC Thunderbolt Hub. I've got one of the first hubs that allows you to take a USB-C out for an iPad and turn it into 3, which is really, really nice, especially on the iPad. Of course, it works with the Mac too, but it's the kind of thing that makes an even bigger difference on an iPad, which only has one USB-C port in it to begin with. Of course, you too, Federico, you had an extension column this week about some really clever magic that you have going on there in Italy.
I did one of my things. Where
you're super complicated, but very clever things.
It started simple and it got out of hand quickly. But it's working. I mean, it's working quite well. I've been using this for the past few days. So without spoiling all the details, I explained how I figured out a way to create reminders, like actual iCloud reminders for Apple's Reminders app, by speaking to the Amazon Echo. The Echo doesn't have any iOS or iCloud integration, but I figured out a way through web automation and Zapier to say something to the Echo, and a few minutes later, it shows up as a reminder in Good Task and in the Reminders app on my iPhone and iPad. There's multiple steps involved. It should really be easier than this. It should all the things that I'm doing that I detailed in the newsletter, they shouldn't be necessary. But hey, it is what it is. It's working. It's it's one of those things where it kind of, it started with like a very simple question, and then 2 days later, I have 4 different services working together to make this happen. But hey, it's
works. One of those things that become a challenge, and then you're not going to let go of it until you figure out how it's going to work. I know how that is.
As long as it works, I'm all good.
The thing to me that was a revelation is the fact that the Echo does not only supports a handful of task managers directly, which is really odd.
Silly. It's stupid because on the Echo you can enable. Like, there's a difference between what can be used as a skill, which is essentially anything. There's thousands of skills that you can enable for the Echo, and what can be used as a default to-do list service. Only 4 services can be used as defaults.
One of which I'd never heard of.
Cozy lists,
yes.
I think. Yeah, it's a family sharing type deal, like family calendars.
I don't do that family stuff.
Yeah, I tried it once, and then we realized, why are we doing this? It's just the 2 of us. We can talk to each other.
Right. You're in the same room.
We're in the same small apartment also. So yeah, it's silly. Go check out the extension column on Weekly for all the details.
All right. The other thing that happened this week on MacStories was we published AppStories, and this is episode 201. We've got a ways before we can celebrate episode 300, I guess. But we started off this next century of episodes with one all about home automation and our HomeKit setups, which I've got quite a few HomeKit devices going at once. And even since we did that episode, I've started doing some more things. So I've been working on different automations, and maybe we'll have to do an update at some point. But yeah, it's all about HomeKit devices, automations, and the setups that you and I use. All right, Federico, it's time for our Unwind Picks of the Week. And I'm going to let you kick it off because it looks like you've got some music for us, right?
Yeah, I have what I think could be considered an EP, even though it's technically a single with a bunch of extra tracks. Okay. It's really confusing. So let's just call it an EP.
Well, an EP, when you think about it, that's really that's a relic of vinyl anyway, right? I mean, yes. What is an EP anyway?
What is
in
it?
The digital streaming world?
I know. So it all started when Travis Barker, who you may know as the drummer of Blink-182, tweeted out a link to a cover of Olivia Rodrigo's Driver's License. If you're not familiar with Driver's License, it is currently the #1 song in the world. It's taken over the Billboard charts. It's this debut single.
Only from 1 week after it was released, too,
only
right? Less than a
8
week,
days, I believe. 8 days after it was released. Driver's License, this beautiful song by this incredibly talented actress and singer, Olivia Rodrigo. This cover that Travis Barker tweeted out a few days ago, it's made by, I think it's pronounced Jaden. It's spelled out as JXDN. His name is Jaden Hustler. He's a 19-year-old singer from Chattanooga, I want to say.
All right.
That's a place, right?
That's in Tennessee, yeah.
Yes, Chattanooga, Tennessee.
So at the other end of the state from Stephen.
Okay. So Hustler sort of became popular as a TikTok personality a few years ago.
Okay.
Making TikTok videos, making little TikTok cover songs and stuff like that. He released his first single in early 2020, caught the attention of Travis Barker, who signed him to his DTA Records label. And he's been working with some really interesting artists over the past few months. And he recently put out this cover song, this cover version of Driver's License, which is a sort of, if you can imagine, the Travis Barker, the kind of artists that he signs. This is a modern punk rock take on Driver's License.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to the cover version of Driver's License, the EP includes a bunch of other songs, such as Better Off Dead, which was co-written with Lauv. You may remember Lauv as, the artist behind one of my albums of the year for 2020. And it was also co-written with Black Bear and co-produced with Barker. And there's another song on this record called Tonight, which was done in collaboration with Ian Dior. And also the driver's license cover was produced by Travis Barker. So I found this collection of songs really enjoyable. This is the modern version of punk rock that is heavily influenced by trap music. Both Jaden and Ian Dior, all these folks, they do a very modern and radio-friendly version of punk rock. So do not expect something like Blink-182 from 20 years ago. Expect more the sounds of, kids who grew up listening to trap music, now trying their hand at punk rock.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really enjoyable. I personally really like this mix of genres and different influences. So you may remember I recommended a while back the first album by a band called Girlfriends.
Oh,
and
yeah.
This is something along those lines. It's very enjoyable, very upbeat, quick, fast songs, really catchy hooks, really well done. Jaden as his first album coming out, I think in early 2021, so I hope in a matter of a few months, called Tell Me About Tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to that. In the meantime, go listen to the driver's license cover and the other 5 songs on this EP, we're going to call it, which I thought they were really cool and enjoyable.
Oh, good. That's interesting. The other thing that's interested me too, now with streaming music, it's so fast to get a cover out. I mean, driver's license hasn't even been out 2 weeks and there's a cover out already.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a really well done cover. Also, it's not like a cheap acoustic cover of a single person playing an acoustic guitar on YouTube. No, this is an actual, real production.
Yeah, it's really interesting. All right, well, I've got a TV show for you, Federico, and it's a comedy. And I think we could all use a little comedy in our lives these days. And this is one that I wasn't sure I was going to watch at first because it is about politics. And, if there's one thing I've had enough of in my life of the last year or 4 years is politics. But it's funny. It's a very funny story. Ted Danson plays the mayor of L.A., and his chief of staff is Holly Hunter. And he's kind of a rich guy who doesn't really know much about politics, who finds himself winning the mayoral election in L.A. and running the city. And he's got a staff and a daughter who's a teenager. And it's just a really good, well-done comedy. It reminds me a little bit, I guess, of like something like Parks and Rec in that kind of vein, where it's a bit of a office-style workplace comedy, but also a political comedy in the sense that Parks and Rec was as well. And it's really well done. It's only been out since January 7th. There have been a couple of episodes so far, and I've really enjoyed it. So it's if you're looking for a good comedy, I would definitely check this one out. All right, Federico, I guess that's it for this week. We are in the middle of winter here in the Northern Hemisphere. And I don't know about you, but I haven't gone out much. But that does mean that I'll be watching a lot more TV and movies. So we'll have more good Unwind picks, I think, over the course of the next several weeks. You can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net during most of the week. And Federico is over on Twitter and Instagram where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next Friday, Federico.
Ciao, John.